Before we delve into this gripping narrative, please share in the comments where you're tuning in from to experience this poignant tale. A routine night turns unforgettable. I've been a cop for 15 years, and I'll tell you this: no two nights are ever the same. You think you've seen it all, and then something happens that shakes you to your core. Something that lingers in your mind long after the shift ends. Something that makes you question everything you thought you knew about people. That's exactly what happened that night. It was around 11:30 p.m. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional honk of a passing car and the low hum of city life settling into its late-night rhythm. My partner, Sam, and I were on our usual patrol route. Nothing out of the ordinary. We had just finished checking in on a noise complaint when we turned onto a dimly lit street near the industrial district. That's when I saw them. A man and a girl walking together. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but something about the way she was moving, it wasn't right. She was hesitant, almost reluctant, her steps lagging behind his. He, on the other hand, walked with a sense of purpose, his grip on her wrist tight enough that I could see the tension from where we were parked. I nudged Sam. "You seeing this?" He followed my gaze and frowned. "Yeah. That doesn't look like a friendly stroll." We pulled over. As I stepped out of the cruiser, the man turned slightly, eyes darting toward us. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before tightening his grip on the girl's arm and quickening his pace. Now, let me be clear. I've seen enough bad situations to know that instincts matter. And right then, every fiber of my being was telling me something was off. "Hey there," I called out, keeping my tone light but firm. The girl lifted her head. That was the moment I really saw her. She couldn't have been older than 18, maybe 19 at most. Her face was pale, almost drained of color, and her eyes, those wide, fearful eyes, locked onto mine like she was silently screaming for help. The man tugged on her arm, trying to move faster, but she stumbled. That was all the excuse I needed. "Sir, hold up a second." I stepped forward, hand hovering near my belt. I wasn't reaching for my weapon yet, but I was ready. The man didn't stop. In fact, he did the opposite. He yanked her even harder. That was it. Sam moved to the other side, cutting off their path. "Buddy, I don't think you heard him." The man finally halted. His face was sharp, angular, with eyes that flickered between us and the girl, calculating his next move. "Just taking my girlfriend home," he said casually. But there was no warmth in his voice, no concern in his eyes. The girl flinched slightly at his words. She didn't confirm or deny them. "What's your name?" I asked, directing my attention to her. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then, barely above a whisper, she murmured, "Emma." That was when I saw it. The slight bulge beneath her oversized hoodie. She was pregnant. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Emma," I said carefully, "are you okay?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at the man beside her, and for the briefest moment, I saw the silent plea in her eyes. Sam and I exchanged glances. That was all we needed. "We're gonna have a quick chat, all right?" I said, keeping my voice calm. "Just to make sure everything's good." The man's grip on her arm tightened again, his knuckles turning white. "She's fine. We don't need to chat." "Yeah, we do." I took a step closer. I needed to get her away from him. Some space, anything. I could already tell this wasn't right. Then, out of nowhere, the man let go. Not just let go, he shoved her. Hard. She stumbled backward, her arms flailing as she lost her balance. My heart nearly stopped as I lunged forward, barely catching her before she hit the pavement. Sam had his gun drawn in a second. "Day one. Now." The man bolted. I barely registered Sam chasing after him because my focus was on Emma. Her breath was shaky, her entire body trembling against me. "You're safe," I murmured. "I got you." But when I looked down at her face, she wasn't just scared. She was crying. silent, broken sobs that seemed to shake her from the inside out. And I knew this was bigger than just a bad boyfriend. This was something else. Something much, much worse. A silent cry for help. There's a certain look people give you when they need help but are too afraid to ask for it. A look that lingers in their eyes, even when they say, "I'm fine." I'd seen it before, on victims of domestic abuse. Kids caught in bad homes, people who had spent too long in the grip of someone else's control. And I saw it now, in Emma. She was sitting on the edge of the patrol car, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her hoodie was slightly lifted from the way she had fallen, revealing more of the small but unmistakable curve of her stomach. She was young, too young to be in the kind of situation I was now sure she was in. I knelt in front of her, speaking low, steady. "Emma, I need to ask, are you in danger?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked past me, down the street where my partner Sam had disappeared after chasing the man. Her hands were shaking slightly, fingers clutching the sleeves of her hoodie as if she were trying to make herself disappear. I don't know," she whispered. That wasn't the answer of someone who was safe. That was the answer of someone who had spent too long being afraid. I glanced up as Sam returned, slightly out of breath, shaking his head. Lost him. Guy knew how to disappear. I clenched my jaw. Of course he did. The ones who do the worst things always seem to be the best at running. Sam's eyes flickered to Emma, then back to me. He knew the look. We'd both seen it before. "Emma," I said again, keeping my voice soft, "was that man the father of your baby?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No." I frowned. "But he knowed you." Another hesitation. A moment of silence. Then, "He owns me." Those words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I exhaled slowly, choosing my next words carefully. "Emma, listen to me. No one owns you." Her eyes finally met mine then, wide and uncertain, as if she wanted to believe me but couldn't quite allow herself to. I glanced at Sam, and he gave me a small nod. He knew what needed to happen next. "Emma," I said, "I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do, but I need you to trust me. Whatever's going on, we can help you, but you have to tell me what's happening." Her fingers gripped the edge of her hoodie again, twisting the fabric. She took a shaky breath. I don't know where to start." "Start anywhere," I said gently. "However you want." She swallowed hard, then nodded. And finally, she began. It started a year ago. Emma had been like any other teenager, young, hopeful, dreaming about the future. She had just finished high school, planning to start community college while working part-time at a cafe. That's when she met Nate. He was older, 28, charismatic, charming. He made her feel special in a way she hadn't before. Her family situation had never been great. An absent father, a mother who was more interested in her next drink than in her daughter's life. So when Nate started giving her attention, showing up at her job, texting her at all hours, she thought she'd found someone who truly cared. At first, he treated her like a princess. Gifts, compliments, promises of a future together. Then the rules started. Text me when you get home. Don't talk to other guys. Wear what I like. Quit your job. I'll take care of you. The shift was slow. So slow she barely noticed it until she was completely under his control. Then came the nights where he got angry. The first time, it was just yelling. The second time, he threw a glass. It shattered near her feet, and he immediately pulled her into his arms, apologizing over and over. "I just love you so much," he had said. "I can't lose you." She believed him. Then, by the time she realized she was pregnant, she was already trapped. That's when the threats started. "You think you can leave. You think anyone else will want you now. You'll never make it on your own. You need me. If you try to run, I'll find you." And she believed that too. Until tonight. By the time she finished telling me everything, she was shaking again. But this time it was different. Not fear, Relief. Like someone had just let her breathe for the first time in months. I let her sit in silence for a moment before I spoke. Emma, you're not alone. You don't have to go back to him. She looked down. But I don't have anywhere else to go. I exchanged a glance with Sam. He gave me a small nod. We can help with that, I told her. There are shelters, safe places for women in your situation. You don't have to do this alone. She hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. But what if he finds me? He won't, Sam said firmly. Not if we have anything to say about it. Emma's lips pressed together, a war waging inside her. She had spent so long thinking she had no choices. Now, for the first time in a long time, she did. Finally, she whispered, "Okay." I exhaled, the tension in my chest easing just a bit. This wasn't over. But it was a start. The road to freedom is never straight. If you've ever tried to pull someone out of deep water, you know they don't always cooperate. They're scared, panicked. Sometimes they fight you, even though you're the only thing keeping them from drowning. That's how it is with people in bad situations too. They want to escape. They just don't always know how. Emma had said, "Okay." But I knew better than to take that as final. Because leaving isn't just walking out the door. It's undoing months, sometimes years, of control, manipulation, and fear. And Nate, he wasn't going to just let her go. The station was quiet when we arrived. It was nearly 2 a.m. now, the kind of late hour when exhaustion settles in your bones, but your mind won't let you rest. Emma sat in the back seat of our patrol car, curled in on herself, hands gripping the sleeves of her hoodie again. She hadn't spoken much on the ride over. She had said she wanted help. But now, as we walked her inside, she looked unsure, like she was starting to wonder if she'd made a mistake. I opened the door for her, stepping inside first so she wouldn't feel trapped. Sam followed, his presence steady, quiet. "You're safe here," I told her. "No one can hurt you." She nodded, but it wasn't reassurance she needed. It was proof. I led her to a small, private office where we could talk. A soft chair, warm lighting, something that didn't feel as cold and sterile as the rest of the station. Sam set a cup of tea on the table in front of her. She just stared at it. I pulled up a chair across from her, leaning forward slightly. "Emma, I know this is a lot. You're probably scared, and that's okay. You don't have to do this all at once." She lifted her gaze slowly. "What happens now?" It was a fair question. I glanced at Sam before answering. "First, we make sure you have somewhere safe to go. There are shelters for women in your situation. Places where you can stay, get medical care, counseling, anything you need." She swallowed. "And what about Nate? We put out a report. If he comes looking for you, if he tries anything, we'll be ready." That should have reassured her. Instead, she looked down, shaking her head. "He always finds me." I sighed, leaning back. This wasn't just fear. This was a belief, one that had been hammered into her over time. That's what people like Nate did. They didn't just control you physically. They got inside your head, made you think they were the only certainty in your world. But I needed Emma to see something else. "Do you remember the moment you realized you wanted to leave?" I asked. She blinked at me. "What?" "You said okay earlier. Something changed for you. What was it?" She hesitated, then slowly exhaled. "When he pushed me." I nodded. "Because." She bit her lip, thinking. "Because I wasn't just protecting myself anymore," she whispered. Her hand drifted, almost unconsciously, to her stomach. I gave her a small nod. "Right. It's not just about you anymore. And I know it's scary, Emma. But you're here now. That means you already did the hardest part." Her eyes met mine, uncertain but holding on to something. Hope, maybe. Sam cleared his throat. "We have an advocate who can talk to you about options, resources. Someone who's helped a lot of women in your situation." Emma nodded slowly. "Okay. It was small, tentative, but it was a step. The advocate, Laura, arrived half an hour later. She was in her 40s, warm but firm, with a way of making people feel safe just by being in the room. Emma was hesitant at first, but Laura knew how to reach her. She didn't push, didn't overwhelm her with information. She just listened. And that's what Emma needed most. Eventually, they talked about a safe house, an emergency shelter for women escaping situations like hers, a place where Nate wouldn't be able to find her. But then, "My ID is in his apartment," Emma said suddenly. "And my phone. And some cash I was saving." I exchanged a glance with Sam. That was a problem. If Nate had her ID, he had a way to track her. And if she went back there, alone, it wouldn't end well. "You can replace the ID," Laura reassured her. "And the phone." Emma shook her head. "But the cash. I don't have anything else." Silence. Then Sam spoke. "We'll get it." Emma's head snapped up. "What?" I leaned forward. "You're not going back there. But we can." Her eyes widened. "But he'll be there." "That's the idea," Sam muttered. Emma hesitated, then nodded slowly. And just like that, the plan changed. 30 minutes later, Sam and I were outside Nate's apartment. It was in a rundown complex, the kind where no one asked questions and no one called the cops, no matter what they heard through the walls. We knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. I exchanged a glance with Sam before calling out, "Nate, we know you're in there. Open up." Silence. Then, footsteps. The door creaked open just an inch, and there he was. Same sharp features, same calculating eyes. He smirked. Didn't know I had guests coming. I kept my voice calm, steady. "Emma left some things here. We're here to get them." His smirk widened. "Oh, she sent her little police friends, huh? That's cute." Sam stepped in slightly. "Not a request, Nate." His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might refuse. But then he shrugged. "Whatever. Come in." I followed him inside, my senses on high alert. The place was dark, cluttered, and I noticed something right away. There were no pictures of Emma. No sign that she had ever lived here. Like she had never mattered. Nate leaned against the counter, watching as we moved. "She tell you her sob story," he muttered. "Girls like her don't," I said sharply. He shut up. I found Emma's ID on the table. Her phone too. But the screen was smashed. Sam found the cash, tucked inside a drawer. A little over $200. Not much, but it was something. We didn't take more than we needed. Didn't stay longer than necessary. As we turned to leave, Nate spoke again. "She'll come back," he said casually. "They always do." I turned to face him fully, meeting his gaze. "No, she won't," I said. And this time, I wasn't just hoping. I knew. Back at the station, I handed Emma the cash and her ID. She looked at them like she couldn't believe they were in her hands. Then she looked up at me. "Thank you," she whispered. For the first time, she smiled. And I knew, really knew, that she was going to make it. Breaking the chains of fear. Most people think escaping a bad situation is like flipping a switch. One day you're trapped, the next day you're free. But that's not how it works. Freedom isn't a moment. It's a process. And sometimes, it's the hardest thing in the world. Emma sat in the back of the squad car again, this time outside the safe house. She hadn't moved yet. Through the rearview mirror, I watched her grip the edge of her hoodie, fingers twisting the fabric like it was the only thing anchoring her. She had said she wanted this, said she was ready. But leaving isn't just about walking away. It's about letting go of everything familiar, even when familiar was killing you. Sam sighed beside me. "She's stalling." "Yeah," I muttered. "She's scared." I got out of the car and opened the back door. Emma didn't look up. I crouched slightly so I was at her eye level. "Emma, what's going on?" She swallowed hard. What if this is worse? Her voice was small, uncertain. I exhaled slowly. Worse than what? She hesitated, then lifted her gaze to mine. And I saw it, the doubt. The damage Nate had done, convincing her that he was the only thing keeping her safe. That's what abusers do. They strip away your confidence, your belief in yourself. They make you think you're incapable of surviving without them. And Emma was still fighting that battle in her mind. I spoke gently, but firmly. Emma, this is your life. Not his. Not anymore. Her eyes shimmered with uncertainty. But I don't know who I am without him. That hit me harder than I expected. Because I realized she wasn't just escaping Nate. She was escaping the version of herself he had forced her to become. I let a beat of silence pass before answering. Then it's time you find out. Inside, the safe house was nothing like the cold, sterile shelters people imagine. It was warm, lived in. A quiet hum of conversation drifted from the kitchen. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air. There were other women here too, some young, some older, some with kids, all of them carrying stories like Emma's. A woman named Maggie, the house supervisor, greeted us at the door. She was in her 50s, with soft eyes but a firm presence, the kind of person who had seen it all and still had a heart big enough to keep going. Emma stood stiffly beside me as Maggie offered a kind smile. You must be Emma. Emma nodded, but didn't speak. Maggie didn't seem bothered by that. Well, you're safe here. No one can get in without clearance, and no one's going to push you to talk before you're ready. Emma's grip on her hoodie loosened. Just a little. Maggie gestured toward a hallway. I'll show you your room. Emma hesitated. She glanced back at me, uncertainty flickering across her face. She was scared, but she was standing on the edge of something bigger than fear. I gave her a small nod. You got this. And for the first time, she nodded back. Then she followed Maggie inside. Back in the car, Sam started the engine. Think she'll make it. I looked out the window, watching as the house lights glowed softly against the night. She already is. The thing about trauma is, it doesn't just disappear. It lingers. And sometimes, when you least expect it, it tries to pull you back in. That's what happened 2 nights later. I was halfway through my shift when the call came in. Disturbance at the safe house. I knew before they even said her name. Emma. By the time I pulled up, my gut was tight with unease. I found Maggie outside, arms crossed, frustration clear on her face. What happened? I asked. She exhaled. She got a call. From him. I tensed. How? Maggie shook her head. We don't know. She didn't have a phone, but someone must have let her borrow one. I swore under my breath. Did she talk to him? Maggie hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. Yeah. I clenched my jaw. Is she still here? Physically, yes. Maggie sighed. But mentally, I don't know. That's when I knew I had to talk to her. I found Emma in her room, sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. She didn't look up when I knocked. Emma. Nothing. I stepped inside, lowering my voice. Maggie told me what happened. Still, nothing. I exhaled slowly, then sat in the chair across from her. Tell me what he said. That got a reaction. A flicker of something. Pain, anger, confusion. Her voice was barely a whisper. He said he forgives me. My chest tightened. Of course he did. The same man who shoved her, belittled her, broke her. Now he was playing the victim, pretending she had wronged him. And Emma, after everything, still wasn't sure if he was wrong. I leaned forward. Emma, listen to me. That's not love. She flinched slightly, like she didn't want to believe me. I softened my voice. You left because you knew something was wrong. You felt it. That's real. That's the truth. She looked up finally, eyes glossy with unshed tears. What if I'm not strong enough to do this? I held her gaze. You already are. She swallowed. But what if? I cut her off gently. Emma, he's lying to you. He's trying to make you doubt yourself. But he doesn't get to control you anymore. She was shaking slightly. But this time, it wasn't just fear. It was realization. Then, finally, she whispered, I don't want to go back. And just like that, she chose herself. For the first time. That night, Emma stayed. She didn't run back to Nate. She didn't let fear win. And that's the thing about healing. It doesn't happen all at once. But every time you choose yourself, every time you refuse to go back to the thing that broke you, that's how you rebuild. That's how you win. Becoming someone new. Most stories end with a single moment. An escape, a decision, a final act of defiance. But real life doesn't work like that. Freedom isn't a door you walk through once and never look back. It's waking up every day and choosing to keep going. And for Emma, that choice didn't just happen once. It happened over and over again. It had been 6 months since the night we found her. 6 months since she sat in the back of my patrol car, hands shaking, heart torn between fear and hope. And now she was someone else entirely. I hadn't seen her in a while. The system worked that way. Officers helped in the moment. But after that, advocates, counselors, and shelters took over. Still, I thought about her sometimes. Hoped she was okay. Then one day, I walked into the station and found a letter on my desk. The handwriting was careful, neat, like the person writing it wanted every word to matter. I opened it, and as I read, I felt something tighten in my chest. Officer Daniels, you probably don't remember me. But I remember you. 6 months ago, you stopped on a street and saved a girl who didn't know she needed saving. That girl was me. I wanted to write because for the first time in a long time, I have something to say that isn't just about survival. I'm okay. More than okay. I have a place to live now. A small apartment. I'm learning how to take care of myself. I still get scared sometimes, but not like before. Now, it's different. Now, I know I can handle it. I have a job too. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. And I started taking classes at the community center. They have a parenting program there. I met other women who've been through what I've been through. We help each other. Oh, and my son was born last month. His name is Daniel. I named him after you. Because you were the first person who made me believe I could be something more than someone else's prisoner. So, thank you. Not just for saving me that night, but for showing me I was worth saving. Emma. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. I sat there, unmoving, my throat tightening in a way I wasn't expecting. In this job, you don't always get to know how the story ends. You pull people out of burning buildings, but you don't get to see if they rebuild. You pull people from the deep water, but you don't always know if they learn how to swim. But Emma, she made it, and that was enough. That night, as I drove my usual patrol route, I passed the street where I had first seen her. It was quiet now. Just another road, just another night. But I knew, somewhere out there, a young woman was holding her son, and she wasn't afraid anymore. And that was everything. Final thoughts. I wanted this ending to feel real, powerful, and deeply human, because true healing doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in the quiet victories that follow. Emma's story doesn't end with running away from Nate. It ends with her choosing herself, her son, and her future.